Thanks for joining us for this episode of Hunger Hunt Feast podcast. With me today is Amber Wentworth. She is a MeatRx carnivore and fasting coach. Amber, thanks for joining me today. You may have come across her on Instagram as Lone Star Keto Girl, if you don't recognize her name. But she is, I met you on Instagram, I believe. Didn't we just meet? Yeah, we met.
Yes.
Yeah. And loved what you were sharing. And I'm so glad you joined me today because I'm looking forward to hearing how you're helping people make the changes they need in their life with the carnivore diet and fasting. I mean, fasting is a big component of what I've been trying to tell people for years, just how beneficial it is. Anything that combines where you're restricting carbohydrates and fasting, is going to be helpful and effective. So thank you, Amber.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Let's start with you. Like, how did you get to, where were you and how did you get to this point of being a carnivore coach?
Okay. Do you want the long story or do you want the short, brief way?
Let's hear it. I know you've got I think you have a great story of how your lifestyle changed and what that did for you and how it helped you in so many ways. And then to go from this, you loved it so much, to now you're coaching. I mean, that's just a great story to hear. So I definitely love to hear how it impacted your life. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just start with saying that when I started having issues with body image and a little bit of weight gain starting at the age of 10. And I was very aware that that I was a little bit different than maybe some of the other little girls at my same age. And so it made me, view myself a little bit differently. And I watched my mom growing up that she was always very aware of her weight because we come from a family of a lot of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, that whole thing. And she didn't want to be like that. So she was perpetually on a diet. And I kind of felt that was something that I obviously needed to do because there's something wrong with me. And so I, dabbled in different diets at a very young age. And by the time I was 15, I was full blown bulimic and anorexic.
Wow.
So I was dealing with that. I've tried so many diets. I can't even tell you, the slim fast, and I was taking diet pills. And back in that time period, the 80s, you got some of that really serious stuff you could buy right over the counter, right?
Good stuff
that
back
you
then.
can't
Yeah,
buy.
right.
Yeah, let me tell you. And I was taking laxatives and all that kind of stuff, and really abusing my body. But in the meantime, I'm trying all these different diets because come on, they're just miserable. I could lose weight, never had a problem with that. So that was never an issue. But I was never able to sustain that weight loss because I can keep eating that way. I hate salads to this day because number one, I'm not a rabbit, okay? I'm not a rabbit. And, I am not meant to eat that. And so it was just miserable. And by the time I was 17, it was the summer before my senior year, I weighed a whopping 98 pounds.
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
And keep in mind, I am 5'2", so I am kind of small, but I was not athletic or anything like that. So it's not like I had a ton of muscle. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
98 pounds of, not compact muscle. So I was wearing a size 00. And back then that was super tiny because the 00 today is not the same as it was then. I'll promise you it's not.
Yeah.
And so I was very, very small, but I had this severe eating disorder. Anyway, I did deal with that. I won't get into all of that mess, but I kind of was able to overcome that without having to have any major help, if you will, like therapy or whatever. But I was able to kind of deal with that. But it's still, even today, it's still in the back of my mind a little bit, just a little bit. And in my 20s, I was okay. I would, gain a little, lose a little. I was never skinny, but I wasn't like super fat or anything like that. And then I had kids and started putting on a little bit more weight afterwards. When I actually had them, I found out I was gestational diabetic.
Oh, wow.
So I had to be real careful what I ate, and I ended up weighing less after pregnancy than I did when I started. So pregnancies, I can't blame on the weight gain, but I kept gaining weight, anyway. By the time I was in my like early 40s, I was having some serious health issues, like
Hmm.
bad, and super high blood pressure and etc. And I hated doctors, so I didn't go see a doctor very often, but I had to go for some weird reason. I can't remember what it is. But when I went in there, they check your blood pressure. Well, mine was so off the charts that they were laying me back, telling me, honey, you need to relax. And they're willing
Wow.
in EKGs and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like going, what in the world is going on? And they gave me medication and said if my blood pressure didn't drop to a certain point, they admitted me to the hospital because I was at stroke level. And then from there, it was like a house
Wow.
of cards. Bam, bam, bam. Health issue after health issue. I found I was pre-diabetic. My acid reflux was so bad that if I even remotely did like this, acid would come up into my mouth, like literally acid in my mouth.
Wow.
And just one thing after another. And at the time, I off and on, depending on if I was on a diet or not,
Mm.
I was eating this typical standard American diet, eating the frozen lasagnas. I had kids, we were busy, we had this stuff, I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
want to cook all the time. I was tired. So sometimes we'd have, the frozen lasagnas and all these kind of stuff. So yes, I ate the processed food. I'm not going to lie. I was not ever a snacker, ever a snacker. And you
Hmm.
wouldn't see me eating chips and all this kind of stuff. Now I like my sweets, won't lie. I like my dessert and stuff like that. But when I was on a diet, I was eating what I thought was healthy, like a bowl of oatmeal with a banana and
Right.
sometimes skim milk, right? Skim milk
Skim.
and
Oh.
margarine because butter's bad. So you have to have margarine. So yes, I had
Oh.
that. And whole wheat toast. But it was the low calorie whole wheat toast.
Of
Yes.
course.
So healthy breakfast, right? And then for lunch, I would have a typical peanut butter and honey sandwich, because peanut butter's good. It's got protein, right?
Whoa.
On the same whole wheat toast, because that's good bread, right? And then dinner, like what I kind of described. But I thought that was healthy, right? Because that's what you're kind of told. That's what you should eat. You should be able to eat fruit and wheat and, all that kind of stuff. The
Yeah.
whatever.
It
So long
fit
as
the
it's whole
pyramid.
wheat and etc.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Pyramid. Yeah. My favorite. Yeah. I have a little picture of my pyramid that I keep around so I can go upside down. But my favorite thing to do. Stupid. But yeah. So I had all those kind of issues. And I was at a point finally where I was ready to give up. I was done. I was just done. I was tired. I was exhausted over it. Tired of losing four times in my life. I've lost 80 to 100 pounds 4 times.
Whoa.
3 of them was Weight Watchers. So
So at this
yeah.
point, how much, I mean, this is you said post-pregnancy, you put on some weight, you've got this blood pressure, you're pre-diabetic. What are we weighing
My
now?
heaviest weight, I could tell you, my heaviest weight was over 240 pounds.
Oh my
Over
goodness.
that. That's just the last known weight. Okay.
So from
And
high school at 98 to adult, 20 years later,
mm-hmm,
240.
mm-hmm, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pretty, yeah.
That's
Not
dramatic.
good.
Yeah.
That's
That
pretty
would be a
dramatic.
lot of,
Yeah.
I mean, it's if a large frame person weighs 240, they
Mm-hmm.
never weighed 98 pounds in
5'2".
their adulthood. Yeah. They never
No,
know. It never
I don't think I
happens.
could now. I'd
No,
have to like
no, no,
remove an
no. And
arm
you
or
shouldn't.
something.
But what I'm saying is that's a span of, that was not something, a small fluctuation. That was a big change for your body. So obviously
Yes.
something was going wrong. Yeah.
Oh, very wrong.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, so like I said, I lost a lot of weight through my life, a lot. If I added that all up, oh, good gosh. But it would keep coming back on, right? Sometimes more. But as I started losing, and the 3 times, honestly, were with Weight Watchers. And I felt that Weight Watchers was the bomb.com. Yeah, I said that. And yeah, I went there. But I thought it was the best thing because you know what? It was a balanced diet. It was the
Right.
best of everything, right? Yes. And I was all gung ho. I even started a blog and this is how you're supposed to do it and all this kind of stuff. And then in the meantime, I'm hungry. I'm hangry. I'm
Right.
feeling deprivation. I hate people around me who can eat whatever they want. I hated them. I wanted to hurt them, because it's like it is
Look
not
out.
fair, and I'd go out to eat with my friends and I would just watch them not care, even if they were overweight or obese, whatever. They felt like the freedom to eat where I didn't. And because I have a really good willpower, that's never been an issue for me. But, and I'm very, I don't like using the word OCD because that's not really right. But,
I know what you mean.
and I'm gung ho.
Right.
You're not going
Extreme
to
level
veer
of
me off my
discipline.
path.
Yeah. Extreme level
Yes.
of discipline. It's like you get focused.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yes. That's
boundaries
it.
are up.
Get out of
No
my
problem.
way.
Yeah.
And I would meet my goal every single time.
Yep.
Never an issue. But as soon as I would approach that point where I thought, I was at maintenance, oh my goodness, that's where things fell apart. I started getting anxious. I started getting upset and worried because I knew it was going to happen because I couldn't continue to eat that way. It was miserable. It was absolutely miserable. So here we go, this roller coaster thing, and big chunks of weight. And that's not even mentioning all the times that I had little pieces, where I lost 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds. I mean, 50 pounds ain't nothing. I mean, that I could dang, like that. So for me, this whole, anyway, so you get the idea of where I was coming from. So after 40 years of that, I was tired. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was exhausted, just exhausted. So I was kind of like, apparently I'm meant to be fat and unhealthy. Why else other reason would there be, right? And so my daughter had come across the exogenous ketones, and I had no clue what that was. I didn't know what ketones was, keto. I didn't know any of that. It never heard of it. Imagine that. How often do you really hear about? Well, now more so, but back then you didn't hear about that.
Right.
And she was going to try this sample pack or whatever, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it one more try, and then I'm done. I'm just done. So I did. And within 2 days, the way I felt, I couldn't believe it. It was like this weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt
2 days.
amazing. 2 days on the product, and I'm not even kidding you, with the ketones, okay? This is, I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying how I came to where I was.
Sure.
But I felt so good that I was like, I could do this the rest of my life. I didn't care. Seriously, in 2 days, I had lost my cravings. I didn't think about food from the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed. Heck, even sometimes I dream about food. It was ridiculous. But I had none of that. And it was like this freedom that I had never felt in my life. And it was the most amazing thing. So I started looking into what is this ketone thing? And then, it came across the ketogenic diet. And I was like, what is that? And so I started reading everything I could get my hands on, all kinds of different books. And as I started learning that, my body can do what that product does. Why didn't I know this? So I, started, moving more towards the ketogenic diet. And I kept tweaking. And this was over 2-year period of time that I kind of went through the process. At first I started where you have the keto treats and the fat bombs, all that good stuff.
The
And you're
dirty keto.
replicating, where you're replicating the things that you used to have. Well, by the end of keto, I was kind of over all that. And I stopped doing a lot of that. I even did recipes. I have a recipe website for keto, by the way. And there's some really good recipes on there, I'm not gonna lie, but they're very yummy. But I found that I didn't really need that anymore. I didn't need that crutch. I think it was good for me to kind of go through the whole spectrum so I could wean myself off, I guess. Some people do better just ripping the Band-Aid off.
Transition.
I'm not one.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I can't do it. I don't jump into cold water either. I have to, toe, foot, knee, no, I just don't. No.
Right.
And so, that's what worked for me. So that, hey, whatever works. And after that, I had a friend who was like, well, you still have a few issues left over. I still had, when I was on keto, I had, lost the remaining part of my weight that I would like lose weight and then I would gain, but never to the full part. And then the next time I'd lose weight, never to the full part. So I was, each time I was starting at a lower weight. Okay.
Right.
But I never fully lost the weight, if that makes sense. So when I went keto, I finished losing the rest of the weight that I wanted to get to. And I got down to 117.
Oh.
And that was it felt good, it felt comfortable there. Anyway, so I had got rid of my high blood pressure, except for one little pill I was still on. And I was taking a lot of medicine at that time. It was ridiculous. But I was off everything but that one pill. I no longer had acid reflux. I was no longer pre-diabetic. My Raynaud's syndrome kind of just went away. I didn't even realize that until years later when somebody asked if anybody knew about Raynaud's, and I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. I haven't had that issue in forever. And it used to be really bad. I had it in my fingertips, and then it spread to my toes. So I don't know if you know what that is,
It's
but it's kind
cold
of like where,
sensation all the time, essentially. Or,
well, it's kind of like your fingertips are falling asleep, but like multiply it by 10 and they
oh,
turn really white. It's kind of related to an autoimmune issue, which
hmm.
big surprise, but it would
Right.
happen generally when you're cold. And
So
I'm a hot
cold
natured
triggers it. It
person
can't
anyway.
happen when you're,
Yes,
oh, okay. I
yes.
see. Yeah.
So that had kind of gone away, but I didn't realize it, like I said, until way later. Um, and there were, pretty much everything was cleared up that I had an issue with, except for, like I said, that one blood pressure medication and rosacea,
Hmm.
which is also related to autoimmune.
Yes.
And I still had some blushing. And it was so much better though, because I used to have like veins and little bumps like acne. It was
Hmm.
bad. I looked like Rudolph. It was bad. Anyway, so my friend was like, why don't you just try carnivore? And I was like, well, okay, if I'm going to advocate for this way of life, maybe I should try the whole spectrum. Because I started out, kind of low carb, moved through keto, straight keto, etc. Why not? That way I can talk about the whole spectrum.
Right.
So I did. And
Hmm.
it was shocking to me that my digestive issues completely cleared up within the first week. And I had no clue that, I don't know why I didn't realize that would happen. Anyway, basically all the fiber I was eating on keto was still causing me issues. But because it was so much better than the standard American diet, I thought
Right.
that was what normal was. But I was still having gas, I was still having pain, I was still having bloating, still having constipation, just not as bad or as often on
Hmm.
keto. And so on carnivore, it was like nothing, zero, nada, so it was
Wow.
like this amazing thing. So between keto and carnivore, with everything that I experienced and this complete liberation from food addiction and feeling wonderful, getting off medication, I realized how important health is. And so that's where it got me to where I am today, because I want everybody to feel like I do. I want everybody to experience these wonderful results and success like I did, because nobody should have to suffer like I did. I
Hmm.
suffered for 40 years and people just don't understand. I mean, whether it was emotionally, mentally, or physically,
Right.
it's not a fun place to be. I would not wish that on my worst enemy if I had one,
Right.
because that is miserable. So that's why I do what I do. That was a
Absolutely.
long
No, that's
version.
great. No, I mean, that's great. I think a lot of people can relate to that, actually. I mean, when you get in our space, we start seeing a lot of very people come from different backgrounds, but they tend to be maybe had a healthy background. We see a lot of former athletes or their medical profession, and they just kind of narrowed them down to um, carnivore to a more extreme than they were, but they were always had a healthy lifestyle. Whereas I think there are a lot of people who are curious. They're they're looking for solutions. They're uncertain because there's a lot of messages out there, especially against meat and protein, which we'll get into. But 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 they've struggled the same way that you have. I've seen that with clients over the years, and or in a very parallel terms, and they just don't know what to do. And the last thing they think about would be, I'm gonna, is sitting down to a ribeye. That's just probably the last thing they're gonna think is gonna be, and 3 or 4 eggs on top of that. And so um, that to to hear your story and your transition, and it was a journey. It was truly a journey. That you
Yes.
went from keto to carnivore, and you're a fasting coach as well. So how do you work the fasting? How did that come in? Because you hadn't quite mentioned where that started coming in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess I didn't hit on that. When I was about a year, not actually more of like 8 months into keto,
Hmm.
because I wasn't hungry, it just naturally happened for me. And
Right.
it got to the point where I was eating OMAD, one meal a day, because
Hmm.
I wasn't hungry. And boy, that is when things really shifted for me. I mean, the weight, I was pretty consistently losing 1 to 2 pounds a week, but bam, all of a sudden, like within the first like 2 weeks, while we were actually on vacation in New Hampshire watching, the changing of the leaves or whatever. I'd never been up north. And so my husband, that's where he's from. So we went up there, and for 2 weeks, vacation, okay? Vacation. While everybody else is eating whatever because it's vacation, I was not.
Right.
And I was not hungry. And if I didn't like what was there to eat, I just wouldn't eat because it wasn't worth it to me to eat crap.
Right.
What I didn't want to put in my body, put it that way. Not that I was being
And
deprived or,
no,
I
feel
didn't
bad
choose
if you
to
ate
eat
it,
that. I
I
didn't
would think.
want it. I didn't want it.
Right.
And so when I got back over the 2 weeks of vacation, I had lost like over 10 pounds.
Oh,
It was
wow.
crazy. And mind you, I had been steadily losing weight. I was very steady losing weight, averaging, like I said, through the whole entire process of keto, of losing my weight, I averaged 1 to 2 pounds. I mean, I maybe, went up a couple of weeks. I might have stayed the same a few weeks. But pretty much it was a nice little downward, trend. And then all of a sudden, bam. So
Mm.
fasting made a huge difference for me at that time. And I very much believe in the benefits of fasting. I know a lot of carnivores do not.
Mm.
They feel like it's not needed. And honestly, it's probably not needed because you're usually pretty satisfied, right? So
Right.
you kind of naturally do it. So they don't really consider that fasting because
Because they're
you're
not putting
naturally
them on a
doing it.
schedule. They're just kind of
Yes,
eating
you're
when
not
they're
looking at the
hungry.
clock. Yes. Oh
Right.
my gosh, it hasn't been, 24 or 20 whatever hours you want it, or
Or
18
16
hours,
or
whatever
whatever.
you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, oh, I got to wait another hour. No, they don't do that for the most part. Some people, some do, but for the most, they don't. And, but fasting has been a really game changer. And the fasting coaching through MeatRx is very new. And there's not a whole lot of us.
Hmm.
And I haven't really honestly had any clients that were specifically fasting yet. So
Okay.
that's very interesting. But I mean, if you think about it, a fasting coach, you just don't eat, right? So people probably don't really think
Right.
about that until
But I
they
think
start realizing they might need the support
right.
or, you know, well, am I doing this right? And I think we're going
Troubleshooting.
to
Yeah.
see,
Exactly.
I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I haven't really coached through that platform on fasting. I mean,
Hmm.
I have discussed with other people behind the scenes, throughout, my 3 years of being keto, carnivore, whatever you want to say.
Hmm.
Um, so,
But you've experienced it. For you, it was working.
oh yes,
But
very
is
much
it real
so.
intentional, or do you kind of go with just how you feel, or it sounds like you're more
Okay,
intentional?
right now,
Yeah.
I was more intentional. Well, even back then, because there was a big thing about fasting, that's when it was like super popular
Right.
when back, with the keto and all. And so I would kind of follow a clock in a way. I had an app. I'm just kind of
Sure.
weird. I was weird that way because it was almost like a competition. It was like a booyah. I made
Right.
it this many hours,
Right.
so it's kind of one of those kind of funny things. But I enjoyed that. So yes, then it was intentional. Now, no, it's not intentional. I pretty much eat when I'm hungry. Now, when I moved to carnivore, I needed to eat more.
Mhm.
I ended up I eat twice a day.
Okay.
It's kind of reducing in the evenings now, so there's possibility I could go OMAD again, but I may not need to. I don't know. But apparently I had a lot of healing to do, and I needed that extra, meat,
Sure.
the nutrients, because I had, oh God, for so many years, think about how much I deprived my body of, not to mention the eating disorders. You factor that into what you did to your body. There's a
Right.
lot of damage. There's
Right.
a lot of inflammation, all the, health issues I had. There's just a whole lot going on there. So I really feel like my body was telling me, come on, give me that meat. I
Right.
need some more of that nutrient dense stuff. And so I did. I just went by with what my body said, and that's kind of what I still do now. I usually at least fast 16 hours, usually 16 to 18 hours. That's pretty much where it is for me. Basically, I skip breakfast,
Sure.
which is fine. I don't care. I'm not hungry. Why should I eat?
Right.
So, that's
That's
kind of where
great.
I'm at right now.
Well, I think that's true with a lot of people. Even if they go to a low carb, they just start cutting the carbohydrates out and start paying attention to that aspect of it. Their cravings diminish. They're not stimulating insulin and the other hunger hormones like ghrelin, so they're not charging their hunger. They're not stimulating their hunger.
Exactly.
when they're trying to lose weight, especially if they're, they're used to snacking. That wasn't a thing for you, but a lot of people, they're in this mindset of eating every 2 or 3 hours, reinforced by the fitness and dietetics community. And as if something terrible is going to happen to them if they don't eat in 3 hours, or if they actually feel hunger, that might be a horrible thing. But once they stop charging that insulin and driving their blood sugar up every 2 or 3 hours, that hunger settles down, and you really just naturally eat less and eat less often.
Absolutely.
So you find that you need less, and I think that's when the weight loss really seems to happen more naturally, without feeling that, like you mentioned, hangry and hungry, and like you're fighting yourself, and like you're angry at other people because they're not paying attention to it, and you're trying to follow these rules and you're miserable. It sort of happens as you change the diet. The caloric reduction happens naturally. The hunger diminishes. The cravings diminish. It's a more natural diet, if you will, but it's a more natural way to lose weight and reduce calorically without intentionally reducing calories. We're trying to measure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so many people equate that with starvation. And it's not the same thing.
That's because they're used to eating every 3 hours.
Right.
Which I
Oh
think
my
is
gosh.
what I would call gluttony.
Yeah. Yes. It surprises me. People can't even leave their house for an hour without worrying about, oh my gosh, what about food? I'm like, really?
Yeah. Do I have a snack in my pocket, my car, in my bag?
Yes,
And
really, really. It's amazing to me, but yeah.
And it's triggered. There's a mental dependence on it, emotional, but I think it begins hormonally when that's how you've trained your body to work, and that's how you fed it. So it's a hormonal instinct. I mean, hunger is very instinctive. And if you feel hungry, like you felt when you were going through those years, that's a real feeling. I mean, it does charge your emotions. And
boy, does it.
You've got to address the hormonal side before you start addressing a caloric reduction, or it's a hormonal response. But what we can control the hormonal fluctuations with how we eat. And it sounds like once you dial that in, it was like you recognized it as such a huge benefit that you just kind of zeroed right in on it. I mean, you had a progression of 2 or 3 years, but that's not very long, really. When you think about
it was life altering. I can't,
you
and
recognized
that's why I'm doing what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
because it is such a, why didn't I know this? Why didn't anybody tell me this? Why is that information not out there? Why did I have to go through 40 years to get where I'm at right now? Why? Because it's the information. They don't want that information out there because it's not going to help, big food, big pharma. I mean, I call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't care. But I mean, when food is designed to addict you, so you keep eating it, and then guess what? When you do get these, diseases, here's big pharma that's going to come along and help you. Yeah. So, I mean, I can't help but think that it's this, it's designed systemic thing.
It's systemic. And then the infiltration with the dietary guidelines, where we have the relationships between the USDA and industry and contracts for like government food contracts. Yes, there is some element of money influencing what we're told. If you've read The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Take-Joyce, she tells a whole story about how they could come into our dietary food guidelines, and they increase the amount of grains and carbohydrates that we're supposed to be eating in our pyramid it was started at 4 to 6, which is still high, and they put it 6 to 11, and nearly tripled it.
Why?
2 to 3 times and that's certainly money driven. Unfortunately, the studies were ignored. The real outcomes were ignored many times and not published. And here we are with a paradigm. You have a solution. You found a solution through your own research that's counterculture, I would say, largely dependent on the internet to spread information, because we were so dependent on mainstream media and mainstream sources before. So it's podcasts and books that through those people who are willing to take a stand and say, hey, this is something different. That are outside of the system. Because if you go to med school or you get an RD or you study nutrition, you're going to study the guidelines. And I got to commend, Sean Baker, Ken Berry. There's so many doctors out there who are taking a stand, who are saying, and many of them through their own experience with trying to resolve their own health issues. And this is what they've experienced. And so people look at it as counterculture. It's like, that's not the guidelines. Yeah, for good reason, because the guidelines are making people sick, as you experience.
Why is that so hard to understand? That's what gets me, is if you look at what happened since they've been implemented. It's not that difficult to see. It's not working.
Obesity and diabetes track pretty
diabetes. Funny you mentioned that, because I actually had somebody comment on a post I had made about basically diabetes can be reversed.
Right.
Obviously, it's not going to be every single person. And obviously, we're not talking about type 1s, although they can potentially get to reduce their insulin. But she said that sugar was necessary for the body, and it was perfectly fine to eat carbs and sugar in moderation if you're diabetic. Okay, first of all, what is moderation? Give me a definition of that works for every person. Tell me, how did they know to moderate? And if you're addicted to that food, which most of us were or are, how do you moderate that? Tell an alcoholic to moderate what he drinks. You can't. It doesn't work that way. So guess what? Sorry, I'm going to have to call Aunt wrong on that one. But, how dare I make people think that they can reverse their disease?
Thousands
have
done it.
You know what?
Thousands. Jason Fung. Jason Fung's been reversing diabetes for years. Thousands of people with fasting and low carb diet combined.
And I do success stories often.
I'm sure you guys have had several people reverse their diabetes.
More than several. Yeah.
Okay.
So it can be done. Yeah. And it was just shocking to me to say that it is perfectly fine for diabetics to even eat sugar. So have your cake. No, it's not okay. It's not okay. I'm not saying never, ever, 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 but this moderation thing, no, sorry.
No, if you're sick and you're trying to undo it, that's not the time to moderate or maintain. That's the time to take charge. No, that's excellent. So let's, how do you guys, I'm sure you're a lot of before and after stories. And so everybody's, I'm guessing, a little different in their transition to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I would think, I know from my experience, one of the biggest hurdles for many people, well, the two big hurdles, one we've already started to address, which is carbs to fat as energy, low carb. So fat and protein. And many women tend to, in my experience, not to make a blanket statements, but many women have their concept of enough protein, let me put it this way, their concept of enough protein or adequate protein is much lower than where, in many cases, I would like them to be. And you may have experienced that as well. And compared to when we talk about, I know what kind of guidelines you and I probably are looking at for protein requirements per pound of body weight or per kilogram. I can guess they're pretty similar. But and I'm going to let you take it from here to explain, but as far as when you start planning out let's say you have an ideal plan, someone's on board, they're mentally there with you, where do you like to start? What do you start with? Meat, fat, or do you look at macros? Do you look at just what they're eating, like a plate, and try to picture in terms of the general size of like what's covering their plate? How does that look usually?
Well, with each client, they're, like you said, they're very different. They have different goals. They have different needs. They have a different past. They're, different ages. They're different sexes. So you have to take all that in kind of consideration, because it is very different. Even though you say, oh, carnivore, you just eat meat and that's all you have to do. No, there's a lot more to it than that. There's still a ratio of protein to fat. There's still, amounts. There's still, and women especially, and you're right, and it may be a blanket statement, but I'm going to just say, because I am one, And I
Yeah.
know where I'm coming from, that, this eating a lot of protein, especially the fat. That was the hardest thing for me on keto, was the fat. That
Yeah.
was difficult for me. And, on keto, you kind of limited your protein because, ooh, gluconeogenesis, or at least when I was in keto, that was the big thing. Of course, that's
Yeah.
just kind of been blown out the water now. But back then it was kind of, I mean, I'm talking just, what, 2 years ago or three
I
years
think it
ago.
depends on where people are coming in from, but there's still a lot of people,
Yeah,
complaining about the
still, yeah.
gluconeogenesis. It's like,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
no,
but I'll
not
let
so
you continue.
much.
I don't want to go down that path, but
Yeah. And like, take for instance, if there's a woman that's like my age and they still have some fat on their body, they're obviously their goal is to lose weight.
right.
Number one, I try very hard to get people to stop worrying about the freaking scale. Just
Right.
stop. Get your health in check, because if you get your health in check, your body can work for you instead of against you, and then it makes everything so much easier. And sometimes
Yes.
the weight just effortlessly over time kind of starts to go down. You just have to be patient. And I hate that P word. My friend Brett will tell you that the P word is not one of my fun things, but I'm not a patient person. But so I get it. I understand, but it's the truth. And I try very hard to get them to focus more on the health and the healing, and understanding that eventually their body's going to, be doing this wonderful thing and being able to work for them. And
Right.
so that's one of the first things I do. But if there's somebody like my age, okay, I'll be 54 in 14 days.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I'm like right
Happy
up there.
birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No,
great.
thank you. Yeah. So I'm kind of, in that age. And a lot of women of my age,
It's a great
the other,
age.
the other word I hate, the M word,
Oh, yeah.
menopause.
You don't have to
Yeah,
say it
well,
if you
that's
don't
kind
want to.
of knocking at my door.
Right.
Anyway, a lot of women, are in that peri or menopausal age. And the doctor I'm working with currently, he advocates for lowering your fat and increasing your lean protein
Hmm.
when you're like at this phase. Now, that doesn't mean it works for every single person, but that's a good place to start with somebody that's in my situation,
Gotcha.
specifically, obviously a female.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you have just a lot of weight on your body, the fat content also comes from not just what you consume, but what's on your body too, right? That's
Absolutely.
part of the overall fat equation or whatever. So you got to kind of take that into consideration. And so that's a big thing. And with women, especially women, they have a lot of mental and emotional issues going on in the background, because we've grown up in this diet culture. And I'm not saying men don't experience this too, but it's very, very dominant with women,
Right.
where you're expected to look a certain way. So obviously you're going to be very focused on the way you look. And there's a large percentage, believe it or not, who have had some kind of an eating disorder.
Hmm.
There's stuff in the past that has caused a lot of trauma, and we won't get into that, but it affects what they're doing at the time. So
Sure.
I try to kind of sometimes their issue is not what they're eating. Like, I'll ask, okay, give me a day of your eating and kind of see what that looks like. And I can find nothing wrong.
Mm.
And then I start asking about stress, sleep, and things like that.
Right.
Or are you going through a lot of emotional issues right now? Is there something really stressing you? And most of the time there is.
Hmm.
And it's not what they're eating. And I'll give them a few little things that they can maybe tweak, because it kind of makes you feel better, like you think you have it planned. But then I try to help them start thinking about other things, like make sure you're getting sleep, and
Right.
do this, do that, to kind of help with yeah. But every person is different, and that's why the whole dogma thing, like we had kind of discussed earlier, it's a real problem, because there's not one right way to do a diet for every single person in this world. There's not.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I absolutely advocate for carnivore. I think it's a wonderful thing. I think it's very healing. I think, especially people with autoimmune issues, or they have a lot of allergies and stuff like that, it's an excellent elimination diet. So you start there. And then if you just feel after you've done this for, 30, 60 days, if you feel you just can't live without something like your broccoli,
Mm.
then add it back in and see what it does to you.
Gotcha.
And then you can start finding out what your body is reacting to.
Hmm.
And not everybody has to be that restrictive.
Right.
Okay, and
Right.
I shouldn't use the word restrictive, because I don't consider it restrictive, because that's what I choose, that's what I want.
Right.
And a lot of people don't understand that either, is that for most of it, I can't speak for everybody, but for many that I talk to, it's
Right.
not about being restrictive. It's what we want. We choose that. It's not like, oh, I really want that piece of cake over there, but I'll eat this meat. No, we don't, we don't look at it like that. It's what we want.
Right.
So I think that's a big difference. But,
Your eyes are
one
on the
person,
results, and I mean,
yes,
and how you
yes,
feel when you do it. And how you
yes,
feel after you eat that cake
yes,
is going to be a little
yes,
bit crappy if you haven't had cake in a while. So
absolutely.
you're going for the long-term benefit, as well as you've created a point of, there's also an immediate benefit of just feeling good after you eat, and not having the sleep disruptions, not having the energy fluctuations during the day. I mean, you just
The
feel better.
bloat.
Right. The bloat. It's one of the first things I hear when people start thinking, oh, my bloat's gone,
Constipation. Yes.
and so you will take, I think this is where I don't want to gloss over this. So that's why the healing that you talked about begins, or is driven by an animal based protein diet. And I don't mean protein exclusively because there's fat attached, but it's just you're eating animal flesh, essentially,
Yes.
and eggs, I would guess. So people, I think, in the mind of many people, especially with everything we've talked about, with what we've heard for the last 40 or 50 years, they don't think of an elimination diet as including meat, because our idea of these fasts and these cleanses are often veggie based, fruit based. They're eliminating meat. I'm going off of meat, or I'm going off at, like, meat somehow hurting them. So obviously, where you guys are approaching this is, we're eliminating vegetables, fruit, grain, and eating only animal products, which I know is not always muscle meat. Some of that includes, I'm sure, some organ meats, some other, a variety of, it's not just necessarily steak every day, but you probably have, certain types of fish, oysters, organ, as I mentioned, organ meat, other, salmon roe, that kind of thing. So there's a variety of things to get a lot of nutrients there that I don't think most people, when they hear carnivore, they don't grasp.
Yeah.
So help me with maybe unpacking some of that, or telling me how that works for people. I mean, what are you seeing when people are transitioning to this diet? And I'm sure they're kind of, in some cases, skeptical when they
Yeah,
start.
there's some are. Now, most of the people I tend to get have already kind of worked through a little bit of that. What they
Sure.
struggle with is the amount
Okay.
that they're still trying to restrict, because it's so ingrained in them. So I have that issue sometimes. And then the fat content. Those tend to be the two issues people have with that. But they've already kind of decided that this is probably a good thing.
Okay.
But for those two things, they still, in the back of their mind, they can't let go of that. So I kind of have to help them through with that. But yeah, your typical person who has not done a little bit of research, or talked to somebody, or known somebody, or heard success stories, do
Mhm.
have that attitude, because good gosh, red meat has been vilified, golly, I mean,
Right.
just horribly, because heaven forbid you have saturated fat. I mean,
Right.
heaven forbid you eat, because animal meat, no, that's not good. You should eat veggies, veggies, veggies. Well, I'm not going to demonize veggies completely, maybe a little bit, but there's a lot of things to veggies that people react to, specifically if they have a lot of inflammation and they're not healed inside. Sometimes you can heal yourself and then be able to tolerate some of the things you used to not be able to tolerate. So yes, you have that. But there are other issues. For me,
Mhm.
personally, what I've experienced, and this is something that has happened to me since I was 3 years old, because I loved vegetables. For breakfast, I'd eat a can of spinach, and that's not a lie. I've said this multiple interviews, but it's really not a lie. I
Huh.
love vegetables, never an issue for me. And I really didn't eat that much meat. I really didn't. At one time, I thought I could go vegetarian, but not quite. But not vegan, but vegetarian. And
Sure.
because I love vegetables and I love fruit, I won't lie. Bananas, oh, that was my thing. But yeah, and but there are certain things in them that are not always good for every person. I'm not saying everybody falls in this category, no, but there are some anti-nutrients that give people a lot of issues. For me, it was fiber. Now, there
Mhm.
might have been other issues in there too, but fiber was a huge one for me. When I eliminated all of that, all of a sudden, all those digestive issues I've had for most of my life,
Mhm.
poof, went away within the first week. It's actually the first couple of days. And that's no joke.
That's amazing.
And I had no, I don't know why I didn't think this, because I knew I had problems with additional fiber, like adding flax seeds or Metamucil or,
Sure.
those kind of things. When I'd get constipated and they say, eat more fiber, I'd eat more fiber and I would be on the ground crying. And so I knew
Right.
I had a problem, but I never thought of the fiber in vegetables as being an issue for me, because vegetables are good. Fruit's good. You're supposed to eat
Mhm.
that. Fiber is good. So I thought it was just the additional stuff that was the issue for me. No, no, no. It was the fiber, period. Because as soon as I transitioned, I got rid of, there was no more gas. And that's a very common thing that carnivores state. It's not just one of us. It's not just my, you know,
Sure.
story. Many, many, many. It's very, very common. One of the most common things that is said is the digestion, clears up. So no
Right.
more gas, no more bloating, the constipation, those kind of things tend to, go away. I'm not saying that sometimes you have transitional issues where you have constipation. There's always going to be exceptions. But for most people, that seems to be what happens. And it did for me. And so even though I love vegetables, I did. I'm not going to lie. I have no desire to eat them again because I know how bad it hurts
Right.
and I'm just over it. And so even though I loved it, I look at it and go, yeah, those are little, little trees of pain. No thanks. I don't want that broccoli. It just doesn't appeal to me anymore.
Mm.
And so, that's my story. But
Sure.
for many people, that is a story, especially if you have autoimmune issues.
Mm.
That group of people, it's so important to figure out what the underlying issue is. And it could be what you're eating, which most of the time I think it is.
That
And by
basically
going
irritating them.
carnivore,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're just eating animal based foods. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who have issues with this, like pork. Some people do. That
Uh-huh.
tends to be one of the high, foods that have issues. And some people, will have issues with beef, but generally speaking, most people can tolerate meat extremely well because it doesn't have all those anti-nutrients like plants do.
Mm.
So by eating that and kind of starting to heal your body, and then if you really want to reintroducing it, then you can figure out what's really bothering you. And I hear success stories every day of people who have reversed things, who have cured some of the, or put in remission, or whatever you want to call it, of their
Sure.
autoimmune issues, and digestive issues, and
Mhm.
all kinds of stuff. So there's something to it. I mean, it just isn't coincidental
Right.
for so many people to be speaking up. I mean, I talk to these people every day.
Right.
So
So they're gathering nutrients, the nutrients they need that many times we're chasing in these plant foods.
oh yeah.
They're gathering them from the meat and I would guess the fat that's in the meat. That's
Yes.
where many fat soluble vitamins and minerals. We store a lot of minerals in our fat, and so obviously these animals would as well. So you're saying they're deriving those nutrients that they need from the fat and the
Absolutely.
meat and I'm guessing there's some collagen and some of
Oh yeah.
the
All that
benefits
good
of
stuff. Yeah.
all the parts coming into it. But it also sounds like a lot of the healing isn't about adding something, it's about taking something away. It's taking away the
Yes.
irritants, lowering
Yes.
inflammation so then the body can heal itself, basically getting out of the body's way by removing irritants or inflammatory
Absolutely.
foods. Okay. So the healing process isn't isn't something you're adding, it's something you're allowing to happen with the removal, by sort of narrowing what's coming in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
think about it. There is no other way to do it. It's a process of elimination, right? So if
Right.
you start at the very bare bones where you know that for most people, meat doesn't have an effect on them.
Right.
Again, there's always exceptions, but if you start there, there's not that anti-nutrient thing that you have to worry about.
Right.
And so your body can heal, or at least improve greatly. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes there's so much damage, diet alone isn't going to help. But for many people, it does. And
Just
at
saying,
least
it's
you
just a
know what the
work.
issue is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and by adding, if you choose to add back in, I don't choose to. So, and maybe one day I will, or if for some reason you find that it is necessary down the road, because science is ever evolving, right? And
Right.
along with that, you have to evolve. So, as you learn and as you grow, I mean, I have changed so many different things through the process as I learn, as I experiment with my own body to find out what I need.
Sure.
Not what, this person
Right.
over here needs, what I need.
Right.
And there's a big difference. So you always have to be open to those things, and
So
experiment
adjustments
and see.
and
Yes, you
yeah.
have to. I mean,
Right.
and let me just tell you, as I get into this next phase of my life, my body's changing, and without, changing anything in my diet or, the movement aspect of my life, I have put on some pounds. Now, granted, I can attribute probably some of it to stress with this whole stupid situation we're in.
Sure.
Um, so yes, I mean, the cortisol in me and all that craziness. So yes, I'm sure there's some of it, but I'm going to guarantee it's all these crazy hormones that are starting to, whack out and get unbalanced.
Hmm.
So, I'm having to work on that. And in the
Right.
meantime, I've had to lower my fat content and up my lean meats. And that's
Protein.
just where I'm
Okay.
at right now to see
Gotcha.
where it takes me. I'll experiment. Maybe that won't work for me. Maybe I'll have to add back in fat. Maybe I actually need more fat. But the only way you're going to know is to try. You
Hmm.
got to start somewhere,
Right.
and you kind of start with the basics, and then you eventually tweak if it's not working for you.
Right.
So, and I think so many people don't do that because they think, oh, well, this is the only way you do it because that's what this person told me.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's true. I think your basics are, though, pretty clear where you start, and that's still, for many people, even if it isn't dead on, it's a better alternative to where they started from. With us, if they're doing a standard
Absolutely.
diet, or if they're miserable, or their weight or is bad, their energy's low. As you mentioned, getting to different decades, we have to adjust, because every decade has its own challenges physically. We have to adjust. And so my wife experienced kind of, I think what you mentioned is that, when you come into that, as you get towards like 50, and I'm turning 50 later this year, things don't happen as quickly when you like you want to take off a couple of pounds, or
Yeah.
it just, things take a little bit more work, or a little more, you have to be more deliberate and more, maybe a little more disciplined to get the same result that you might have gotten when you were 30. If that, that, I think that probably resonates with a lot of people in a lot of
Yeah.
areas. So it's not what you're saying is basically, here's the basic, start here, and then you can adjust as needed. But at that point, you're figuring out that your body's healthy enough that you can actually listen to it at that point, and fine tune to what you need, as it's not going to look like everybody else. But the basics really begin with an animal-based diet, varying degrees of fat protein ratio, but you eliminate, and then it sounds like add in as tolerated if necessary. But
Yes. Or
where
if
does
you
your
just really feel like you need to, or you
right, if you
want
feel
to.
like you need to,
Some
yeah.
people just really want that salad or whatever. Again, I don't get that because I'm not a rabbit, but
Right. Well, and you had a negative experience with it for much of your
Mm,
life.
yeah.
Um, so when you say, let's talk about protein for a minute, because that's one of those things that, as I mentioned earlier, there's such a varying degree of not only official recommendations, whether you talk to a sports coach or you go to the WHO or the dietary guidelines for Americans, and then just how people feel. I mean, if you had, what do you, in terms of protein goals, let's say you're trying to get somebody who just, they want a number, they want a target, what should look like normal for me? I'm guessing there's a ballpark. There's like a spectrum or a range that you try to tell people to aim for to help change how they think about protein or amount of meat they're supposed to, because you mentioned they're not eating enough. So you kind of have to give them a target, I would assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of people really need that. We like to say the philosophy is with the coaching is you eat until you don't want to really eat another bite. And I never fully understood what that meant until I actually experienced it, where I literally had to take the meat out of my mouth because I could not physically chew it anymore. I was done. So, you kind of want to get around it. I know this sounds crazy, but it's true.
It's counterintuitive for so many people.
Yes, it is.
Because of what they've been told about calories.
Oh gosh, yes. Trust me, it was difficult for me.
Okay.
But if you do that, then you don't eat again until you are truly hungry. And it's not it's noon, I need to eat now because it's noon. Or,
Right.
I'm bored, I need to eat. No, that's not what we're talking about. That's a different kind of hunger. We're talking about actually your body saying, hey, I need nutrients. And you do learn the difference. You can. I mean, there are obviously exceptions, because there are some people who have a binge eating disorder who really can't shut off that when you're full, when you're not kind of thing. There really are those people. I've met some, and it's hard for me to understand, because even though I did have a binge eating disorder, I physically can't overeat meat. But there are some who can, so I have to say that statement because I always get myself into trouble, or
Sure.
somebody's going to say something.
But for the most part, they've triggered a
true.
hormone that makes enough leptin that they kind of go, I'm
Yes.
satisfied
It's
and I
just
don't want
done.
another bite. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you're doing that, you don't really need a, target. But for people who are starting and coming from the whole calorie thing,
Right.
they need something. Now, for my personal, what I believe, based on what I've read, what I feel, is a good range would be 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. That's kind of where I'm at. For me, I tend, and like I said, I eat by instinct, and I stop when I'm full, eat when I'm hungry, kind of thing. But because I've had so many questions about what do you eat, and I could tell you, I eat 8 to 10 ounces of ground beef for lunch, and then I'll have another 8 to 10 ground beef at dinner. That's kind of pretty much 80% of what I eat, and then I'll have a 8-9 ounce fillet for dinner for some nights. Sometimes I'll have salmon, whatever. And but they want to know, well, how many grams of protein? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't count that. I don't have to worry about my macros. It is what it is,
Right.
So a couple of days, I kind of measured everything, but I tend to eat the same thing on most days. So, it's pretty easy. And I was eating about 135 grams of protein.
Wow.
And yeah, like
that's
I
great.
said,
I mean, I'm just thinking, wow, in
on,
terms of like you're 5'2", you said, right?
yes.
And you're in the 115, 120 range, give or take.
Well, because I've gained weight over the, this period in the last, month or so.
Yeah.
Well, I actually had gained a couple of pounds when I was on a carnivore in the beginning, because ladies, I'm sorry, but sometimes it does happen when you're trying to heal your body from so much, nutrient depletion from the past. Sometimes you do gain a little bit of weight at the beginning, and then it usually levels out. Well, then I get hit with this, time period of my life or whatever, so it makes it a little bit different. And then the stress. So I put on about 10 pounds. So I'm still eating
not
a little
a health
bit more
risk.
protein than what I weigh. Yeah, not a huge thing. I know people are like, whatever. But for a small person, it shows up.
But it's not.
And
but it's not. What I'm saying is, I'm not, and I don't want to draw attention. I didn't say that to draw attention to your to your weight, and I don't want other people to feel like that. The under the microscope of women and weight is such a bad. It's just not. It's not a good.
And I'm trying to get away from that. Honestly,
right.
It's like.
But in terms of your general size,
yes,
135 grams of protein. Is significant.
Yeah, it's more than I weigh.
To what most women eat. In fact, most men at that, are not going to eat more grams of protein than their body weighs.
Yeah.
in most cases, and they've been told not to. So that's why I wanted to kind of hammer that. It's
Yeah.
like you're eating a significant amount of protein
Hmm.
that is allowing you to eat twice a day
Hmm.
to satiety without worrying about how much you're eating. You're eating till
Yeah.
you're full. You wait till you're hungry again. You
Yes.
eat again till you're full. And then you don't worry about it. Like it's a
No.
very non-stress way to eat as
Oh,
opposed to everybody else
oh, yes.
weighing, measuring, counting.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
It's very liberating.
you kind of learned, you've healed, you're hormonally healthy. So you can listen to your body and tweak, but I said about this much meat, I throw it in the pan, I cook it. About this much meat again, or
Hmm.
this, depending on what my options are, I eat this again. And there's no stress about counting stuff necessarily. You kind of know what it looks
Yes.
like.
Yes.
Cook it.
And your body will stop you. If it's too much, it will stop you
Right. You just
unless
put it in
you
the
have one
fridge.
of those disorders, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, forcing yourself, I'm not talking forcing yourself to where you're like, I'm gonna puke if I eat another
I
bite.
have to
No,
have
it's
this much
not the
food.
same
I'm going to
thing.
make myself eat it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. You don't do that. And like one of my clients, one of the things she kind of is like, well, what do I do if I have, a certain amount that I thought I was going to be able to eat and I don't eat? I'm like, but yet that's my goal. And I'm like, if you're not hungry, stop,
don't eat.
stop.
Yeah.
But am I starving myself and I was like, if you're listening to your body is very smart. That's why we're still surviving as humans.
Right.
It is a smart biological machine, and just listen. And if you clear your body of all that, the crap that causes those messed up signals, you should be able to listen to your body. Again, there's exceptions, with
Mm.
some of the binge eating disorders and stuff. But generally speaking, you shouldn't really have a problem with that. And I think it is very difficult, especially for women. Um, you know, like we went to this barbecue place in Austin, and I'm sorry, but I'm just going to call it as being the best barbecue place around. And I don't care. You can come at me with the whole Franklin's is better. Don't care. This is
No,
really,
I've been to
really good barbecue.
Texas. Texas, you
Okay.
can't. I
Yeah.
wouldn't even. Yeah,
No,
it's
right?
great
Yeah.
barbecue. Yeah.
It's
Awesome.
really good.
Yeah.
I sat down and I ate seriously a pound of brisket myself in
Oh, I'm
one
proud of you.
sitting.
I
I
love
couldn't believe it.
brisket.
I looked at my husband. I was like, oh, do you think that was a pound that and he was like, yeah, because I didn't eat that. And I was like, oh my God. But,
You're keeping
I
up with
didn't want to
Sean.
eat anything else, but
Sean
yeah,
Baker.
I couldn't believe it. But it's not something I would normally do, but it was super good. And I was hungry and I didn't eat for a very long time after that. But, so just go by what your body is telling you. If you've done
Right.
your work and got rid of all the garbage and all that
Right.
mess,
Well,
because
you had an
it is
enjoyable
it is
meal. I mean, you
oh,
enjoyed
it
it. You had
was.
a
Oh.
guilt-free, enjoyable meal.
Oh.
You
Yeah.
didn't feel
I
like
was
you
kind of
missed
guilty because I
anything.
felt like I ate more than my share. That was the guilty part. And I
But
was like, oops. And my husband's just grinning. He's laughing. He was like, no, go right ahead.
well,
No, I like seeing you enjoy it.
that's huge. That's huge to go in and eat what you know you're supposed to eat. You know it's healthy for you. You ate till you were full. You enjoyed it. You had pleasure with your meal, which is supposed to be part of it. It was a treat, and yet it was a treat without adding anything that your body didn't need or shouldn't have. I mean,
Exactly.
it's really the best of all things because it was 100% healthy and 100% enjoyable. And you weren't thinking about how much am I eating? Should I have more of that? You were just enjoying it in the moment, which is what eating
Absolutely.
is supposed to be.
Yes, it is. And there's a big difference, I think, like before, when you're carb addicted and everything, you're living to eat instead of eating to live. But just
Right.
because you're eating to live does not mean you don't enjoy your food. And a
Right.
lot of people don't get that because they're like, oh, it's so restrictive. I couldn't just eat the same thing all the time. And number one, you don't have to eat the same thing all the time. Yeah, granted meat, but you know, you can have eggs. You can, some people, if they tolerate it, cheese and, you
Hmm.
know, stuff like that. And organ meats. Now, I personally, I cannot eat organ meat. No,
But you
no.
can
I've
supplement those
tried
things to get
it.
those nutrients. There are
If
great
I
supplements
felt
out
I
there
needed to, I
for
would.
organ.
But,
Yeah,
you know, so far I don't feel like I need to.
sure.
I think I'm going to get my blood tested, just, you know, do some tests and just kind of get a markers of where I'm at just for my own fun, I guess. And if I found that I was deficient in something like vitamin D3 or magnesium or something along those lines, I would definitely supplement with something, sure. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, you can
you
get the
should
organ
watch my
supplements like
videos
ancestral.
where,
You know, you get
yeah,
the desecrated organs
yeah,
in tablets and
yeah, there's a
powders and
lot of
stuff.
good stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of good
Yeah.
ways to set. You don't have to eat the organ meats specifically without getting the organ meat benefit. Right. So
Exactly.
that's I think that's pretty common with the carnivore community. Um, in that you were getting all of your everything that you actually need. You find a way to get what you need, the nutrients you need from this source, and it's not a restrictive source, but you do tend to, like most of us, when we find something we really like and we find a simple system that works with our work schedule, we tend to gravitate to certain things that just
Yes.
are easy to do. I love this. It's enjoyable. And then occasionally there's some variety for certain occasions or
Yeah.
whatever. But, I mean, I have seen some variety, some, like you mentioned, some of the other keto carnivore coaches out there, people who post on Instagram, they have these, you know, the egg yolks on top of even Sean Baker.
Yep.
You work with Sean Baker. I
Mhm.
wouldn't talk much
Yes.
about Sean. He's the MD who started the MeatRx protein
Yes.
program. And he's a beast. I mean, if
Yes,
you see
he is.
pictures, he's how old? He's 52
He
ish,
is a year younger than me, so he's
52, 53 in
50,
there.
52, 53. I think he's going to be 53 on this next
Yeah,
birthday.
lean, muscular, very active guy. At 53 years old, puts many
Hmm.
30-year-olds to shame physically.
Oh yeah.
And he's
And no, he
pulling
does
out
not take
giant ribeyes
steroids.
and putting egg yolks on
Yes,
top of them, and that's his meal. It's a one
that's
pound
his
ribeye he
steroids.
often pulls
Yep.
out, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of
Yes.
meat.
Yes.
And he'll add a few egg yolks for other nutrients and so forth, and just for his own enjoyment. And he's found that what works for him. Um, and again, an MD who is
Yes.
extremely um, healthy at a time when many people are struggling with their health. They're on many medications. They are having to regulate things like their blood pressure, their blood sugar with meds, like you were experiencing.
Yes.
And the guy, I mean, he's definitely a pioneer in this as an MD who is helping people with wellness heal their body nutritionally, and not with the guidelines, but from a very, you know,
Yes.
outside the norm approach. And he's a living, breathing example of it.
Exactly. And I will just insert one little thing
Sure.
since we're talking about him. When I first discovered Sean, I just happened across a video he had done. I didn't see him on Joe Rogan. I didn't really know about this whole carnivore movement at the
Mm.
time. I didn't know I was doing keto. I didn't, you know, I was just always out there researching. That's what I do. A lot of my day is researching podcasts, you know, listening to different stuff, reading different books. You know, it's very important to me to keep learning, right? And I
Hmm.
happened across one of his videos, and he was speaking of dogma, and basically, and the way he approached things, where he was basically saying, no, not everybody needs to be on a carnivore diet. I happen to think it's, you know, a great way to, you know, live and, you know, et cetera. Of course, he's going to advocate for it. But at the same time, not everybody has to go that far. And
Hmm.
that's okay. You do whatever you need to do for you to be healthy. And I was like, oh, whoa, wait, I like this guy, you
Right.
know? Wow, what a philosophy, because I was so tired of this bickering about, you know, you have to have this or no, you don't have this, your
Right.
macros better be this, and you know, it was just it was so annoying. You got so much noise that you don't know what's right. And so for somebody to say something so refreshing, I was like, you have my loyalty.
Mm.
Now,
You trusted him. He
so
built your
yeah,
trust by not
yes,
being
yes,
like, it's my way or the highway. And then you're like, okay, this
exactly.
guy
Yeah,
has some integrity, and he's not just trying to make everyone believe his own way, but
yeah, and shoving it down your throat. I hate
right.
that. I hate that. I hate
Yeah.
that. And so that's a big turn off for me. And matter of fact, his book, The Carnivore Diet, I love that book, because he again reemphasizes that fact that, okay, look, and he will talk about how diet doesn't necessarily reverse every single disease or cure every single thing.
Mm.
It goes a long way with a lot of things, but it doesn't, and that's refreshing, because you hear so much where it's like it's this miracle cure, and for many it is, but it doesn't mean that is the cure for every single person. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And so he's
Sure.
very open to that, and he will talk about, you got to do what is best for your body, and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I have huge respect for the man, huge.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I'm as active as I am, through the MeatRx platform, because I believe in it. And I think, so many people are being helped.
Mhm.
Listen to the success stories on MeatRx.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's just one
Mhm.
after the other after the other. And he's giving a platform for people to get out there and show from personal experience what they've been through. And that resonates way more than some dumb study that's been done by, funded by some biased person who
Right.
have a certain agenda or objective, or, just want to prove their hypothesis instead of what's really the truth, cherry picking details, you know.
Right.
I'd
Right.
rather listen to people all day long who tell me what they did and what, they experienced, than some paper, you know.
Right. A
So
singular, like, this is my story. This is what yeah,
yes,
it resonates with people. Those stories
yes,
really resonate because, they're authentic, and they're not saying anything other than this worked for me.
yes,
But when you hear
exactly.
100 people say the same thing,
Exactly.
you have to
That's
pay
when you
attention.
go,
You have to pay
maybe.
attention. And
Yes.
finally, the system, I think, the system, but it's beginning to catch up with us. I know Sean posted it. I've been talking about it, that the last article came out a couple weeks ago from the Journal of American College of Cardiology, showing that saturated fat, looking as basically a review. It wasn't a new study. It was a review of studies going back into the 60s, some of the biggest heart studies and dietary studies we've had, basically saying saturated fat, there's no evidence that saturated fat causes heart disease,
That's exactly
naturally
right.
occurring saturated fat, not
Yes.
trans fats, not Crisco and margarine,
Right.
which are saturated, but traditional, naturally saturated fats, no longer cause heart disease. And some were actually cardioprotect or protective against stroke, is what
Yes.
was a phrase in there. And and I know there's some people just blowing their mind, and the rest of us are kind of going, oh, well, it's about time that
Duh.
somebody spoke the truth in mainstream and was able to get it into a mainstream journal, not some fringe
It's
journal.
kind of shocking, to be honest.
It's shocking, delightfully. You want to do a happy dance and
Yes.
cry, and do,
Yes. I know,
for
right?
those of us who've
That's
been
really
towing the line
sad,
for a while,
though.
and you
Yes.
kind of go, well, now what? Now, how does this? What are they going to change? And so that, we'll see what happens from this, but it's definitely a
Yes.
huge step forward.
Yes, I agree.
And
I think we're going to see a lot more. There's going to be a lot of resistance. We're already witnessing it a lot. There is a lot of censorship going on.
sure.
Every time I post, I can repost other people's information, but when I post my own content,
Hmm.
every single time I get a message saying there's an error uploading your post. Every single time I've taken pictures, screenshots
Mm.
of it. And like Maria and Craig Emmerich, oh my gosh, the censorship on social media between Facebook and Instagram has been horrible. So they're kind of branching out and trying something new. That's why Sean is starting the MeatRx platform, because when all this gets too much, the censorship gets
Yeah.
ridiculous, then we have somewhere to go. So a lot of
Gotcha.
people are starting to branch out and go in different areas, because we are experiencing a lot of resistance.
Right.
And because the movement, the agenda is to go more plant-based.
Right.
And anybody who doesn't fall in line with that is seeing issues happen. I mean, I'm experiencing it
Yeah.
myself.
Well, Rob
So,
Wolf has been
I
talking about
don't
it
doubt
for
it.
months, if not a year. Rob Wolf has been, who's a pioneer with the paleo
Yes.
movement, and he's getting, like you said, his own platform. They're producing a movie about this to really help educate people in, there really is a earth friendly, carbon friendly way to live
Yes.
raising meat that's far more friendly than plant-based. And
Yeah.
and it's not, like you said, it's not the current agenda of the mainstream. And so it's not being heard, and it's being suppressed to some degree. And so you're
Yes,
not the only
very
person
much.
saying, I've heard that across with several people. It's being, and I've seen it where it's like they sort of the fact checkers, and they'll kind of block something off.
Oh,
They'll say,
uh,
so I know what you're talking about. People say, oh, this sounds kind of, no, it happens. I've seen it, Facebook and Instagram, well, and even Twitter, they
those
will,
fact checkers.
the fact checker one, and you kind of go, when did the tech in the basement of Facebook who's
Exactly.
fact checking have any clue about what the facts
We
are
need
on
fact
nutrition?
checkers to check the fact checkers
On,
because
well, I
this
mean,
is
on nutrition,
ridiculous.
like what I mean, so it's just kind of
Yeah.
you've got some nutritionists down there in your basement of Facebook. Is that what's going on?
Yep.
Well, I love that you've given me this much of your time, and I think we really dug in here. I want to help people find you and to know how to connect with you. You do. You're involved with more than one. I mean, I know you're involved with the MeatRx podcast. I think I saw that you have something of your own going on YouTube as well. Is that keto?
Yes, I'm gonna yes. I actually have a podcast with my friend Brett, who's a carnivore, and we do a podcast called KetovoreKast. We've been kind of, not very consistent here lately. We've been super busy, and with all this mess going on, there's just stuff. Anyway, we do
Sure.
have that going on. We just kind of hang around, chat. We do it on Instagram Live, so people can come on and join, ask questions, be part of the conversation,
Oh,
whatever.
great.
We do that, and I am actually going to start doing my own podcast because there are so many interesting people out there, so
Right.
many that I just adore, and we've kind of become friends and talked, and I learn more, and I'm like, people need to know about this person because they're fascinating and they have so much that they can offer. And
Right.
so I want to showcase them as much as I can. It's
I
not
can
like I
relate.
have the biggest platform out there, right? But it's, I just feel that they need to get out there and let other
Absolutely.
people see that these are the
Yeah.
amazing people. So it's just going to be part of my YouTube. But I'm going to start doing that in the next couple of weeks. I'm getting that started.
Great.
And I'm all over social media. My YouTube is Lone Star Keto. I'm on Twitter, Lone underscore star underscore keto
Okay.
on Twitter, and because they wouldn't let me do my whole name, it's ridiculous. But Instagram is Lone Star Keto Girl.
Yes.
Facebook Lone Star Keto. Yeah, what else?
Your
And of course,
website
I'm
as
on
well.
MeatRx. If you're interested in a coach, there's more than me. We have lots of good coaches who honestly want to help people. It's extremely affordable. We have great people who care and really want to help. It's not one of these, oh, let's just, make a bunch of money and not care about people. No, that's not the point. We make it very affordable so people can, get more help. And it's not just about what you eat. It's about being accountable. It's about having support, having somebody to listen to, because there's so many people who don't have that. They don't have the support. And it's amazing what having somebody who understands to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And so reach out, and you, like I said, there's a lot of coaches. You don't have to pick me, but you can go through their bio and see what they've been through, what their experiences is, and find one that fits for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, did I cover
I think that
everything? I
was
think I covered
wonderful. And I'm going to
everything.
link to these in the show notes where people
Right.
can look and find their favorite, platform that they want to connect with you on. I think you're extremely active on Instagram. I know that.
Oh gosh, yes, that's my big platform. Yeah.
That's your main platform. Okay. So if
Yeah.
people want to really connect with you, that'd be the great, and that's where you do the live videos and really are talking to people and
Yes.
building
Yes.
the community. Okay. But I'll definitely link to your, the MeatRx coaching link as well, so that people can find you. Again, this is awesome. I appreciate your time and your openness with everything that you shared, your journey. I think that's important for people to hear and connect with, and just really, humanize. But they can identify with, I think, so many of your struggles and your hurdles in getting to this point. Because it is confusing out there. There's lots of mixed messages, and
Yes.
it's hard to weed through there. So, if you're listening to this and you've tried what you think is everything, there's one more left.
Yeah, there is. There's
So
hope. There's hope. I promise there's hope.
there's hope.
It's
Oh
just
yeah.
finding what's right for you. There's
Yeah.
hope.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you again, guys. Check
You're so
the show
welcome.
notes for the connections, and look for Amber, Lone Star Keto Girl. And don't be afraid to try something new, try something that is not what the mainstream's telling you to do, but
Absolutely.
would the worst. You're going to eat some really good, tasty food while you're trying this out. So it's definitely not an unenjoyable experience. But give it a shot and see what your body tells you. See how your body feels. And again, we don't have to be afraid of saturated fat. There's no harm here. There's no harm done whatsoever. Give it a shot, and connect with some great people at MeatRx. So
Yes.
again, thank you again, Amber. And I
Thank you
look
for
forward.
having me. It's been fun.
Absolutely. I look forward to continue chatting with you on Instagram.
Thank you. Bye.